Hey guys, welcome to another Photoshop tutorial with PSD Box. This is Andrei, and in this video I will show you how I created this concept manipulation in Photoshop. What we will see in this tutorial is how you can combine stock images and create this kind of dramatic effect. We will work with adjustment layers, and towards the end of the video I will show you the adjustments that I used to get this kind of effect, and how I used the lighting effects filter to get this lighting effect, and how to get this this look. I used Photoshop CS6 to make this artwork, but you can follow this tutorial even if you have Photoshop CS3, CS4 or CS5. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and let's get started. Okay, this is not a beginner's level tutorial. You should be able to know how to work with layer masks, how to create layers, how to work with adjustment layers, clipping masks. I'll try to give you as many details as I can. I'll explain everything, but even so, you'll need to know the basics. I already have a beginners series on my channel, so just go there, and I have a playlist talking about everything from the interface to adjustments, layer masks, and all that kind of things that you will need to know. So well, let's get started. I'll close this document because I'll do it over again. On my website you will find the links to all these stock images, and if you're a premium member you will be able to download the PSD file and this video as well. But some people ask me why I don't provide the links on YouTube, and the answer is because the platform that I use to show my tutorials is my website, not YouTube. I just use YouTube because I can upload the videos there, and I don't. So if you want to get the links to the stock images, just go to my website, and you'll find this video also embedded on my website. And you can also embed this video on your website as well if you want to. I don't mind, as long as you don't download it and pretend it's yours. You can use the embed code that YouTube gives you and put it on your website or your blog or whatever you want. So let's open this background image. We'll start with this one. I'll open it, and I'll open the other image, which is the sky. I'll go a bit quick with this because it's a standard procedure, I would say. Just open the images and paste them on your document. Press Ctrl A to select the entire canvas, Ctrl C to copy it, Ctrl W to close, and Ctrl V to paste the image on your document. And we will need to unlock the background, so the quickest way of doing that is pressing and holding the Alt key and double clicking. And let's rename this to background, and this one to Sky 1, and I'll drag the Sky 1 layer below the background because I will use a layer mask on this background. So click this icon to create a layer mask for the background layer, and get the gradient tool, use the linear one, and just use black and white, and press and hold the shift key so that you can draw straight lines, and just delete this part of the sky. Let's reverse it. Don't create a line like that. We need a rather hard selection, and I'll have to make the sky a bit bigger. Press Ctrl T to load the free transform, press and hold the shift key to constrain the proportions, and just make this image a bit bigger like that. And I'll go back to my layer mask and create this gradient again. Okay, something like that. Now I'll select the layer itself and drag it a bit lower because I want that horizon to be a bit, I don't want to have it here on the middle. I don't like it. And now I can select the sky and position it a bit higher up like that. And if you're happy with this, you can leave it like that, but I wanted to add another sky on top of that, which is this one. Again, Ctrl A, Ctrl C, Ctrl W, and I'll paste it above the sky one, and I'll have to make it bigger to cover my entire work area. place it there. Let's name it Sky 2 and create a layer mask for it, and again use the gradient tool. And I'll have to start the gradient from here and end it somewhere here because I don't want the treetops to be visible. So I'll click here and do something like that, maybe a bit smoother. And that way I have these clouds here, and now I can move maybe the sky one a bit lower. Something like that, and I still see some of the treetops from here. So I'll select the Sky 2 layer mask, get the brush tool, increase the size and use hardness 0. A lot of people have been asking me why do I use this instead of using the keyboard shortcuts. I just got used to this, and for the size I have the Q and W keys to change the size, but for the hardness I don't like to use that Alt thing. I don't even know how it's done with the right click and Alt. I don't like this. I don't know why, but I don't like it. I prefer the right click and just change my size from here, and that way you can also see the sizes that I'm using in case you wonder the exact size of the brush. Just paint with black to get rid of this treetops. Remember to use a really soft brush and maybe even decrease the opacity of the brush when you do that. I'll go back in the history a bit because I painted too much there. Okay, something like that, and maybe this part's here, and maybe here a bit. Okay, just make sure you don't see the treetops, these trees here on your image. Oops. And once your sky is done, we have to make this look a bit more even. Maybe you'll have to work a bit on the layer mask on the background because I don't really like that line there. So I'll use the brush tool again, use a soft brush, and I'll leave the opacity and the flow to 50% more or less, and just paint a bit here on that line on the layer mask with black because I want to get rid of that. I just want a faint line there to let me know that there's a horizon there but not too strong, something like that. And once I have these 3 layers, my background is ready. All I need to do now is add a hue saturation on top of those. So hue saturation, I don't need a clipping mask because I want to affect all the layers, and I'll set the saturation to -70. That way I desaturate the image. The reason why I desaturate the image so much is because for this kind of concept artworks I like desaturated images with this kind of hard light effect. I just like how it looks. And the next thing that I'll do is add the main elements, which is this door. This is a PNG file, so there's no need to crop it. Just copy it and paste it on your document. I'll rename it door and press Ctrl T to load the free transform. Press and hold the Shift key and make it smaller. The reason why I press the Shift key is because I don't want to do things like this. See? If you press the Shift key, it will constrain the proportions, and if you want to make sure you don't make it too small, you can turn it into a smart object first and then resize it. It's up to you. I'll make it about this big. I made the Spanish version of this tutorial as well, so I know more or less how big it should be. Something like that, but I want to rotate it just a bit because it's not straight. Okay, that looks better. And now I'll add this. I call this a monument on the original image. I call that layer monument. I don't know what this thing is. It's just a piece of stone. And I just need this circle here. I don't need the background. So what I'll do is select the pen tool, set this to path, select the layer, and just create a path along this. So I'll click here. You don't need to be very careful around these edges because we will mask them to make them fit our background. You'll see that in a moment. We'll use a special brush for that. We will mask these edges here. Just draw a path along this circle here, like that. Zoom in a bit, take care of this part. zoom out and just make that selection there. You don't even have to close the selection. Oh, well, let me close it. Okay, and now just click this selection button, right click and choose make selection, set feather to 0, click OK, and once you have the selection, press delete to delete that background, because we only need this part here. Select your object, Control C to copy it, go back to your document, and Control V to paste it. As I said, I'm going a bit quick here because it's standard procedure, you should know this. Let's name this, as I said, to monument, and I'll make it smaller and put it here, and see that shadow right there? I want that shadow to be on the right side, and I'll press Ctrl T to load the free transform, right click and flip horizontal, and I'll make it a bit bigger, something like that. Maybe a bit smaller. Okay, the reason why I flipped it is because I want the shadow to be on the right side. You can see it here on the door that this part is in shadow, which means the light should be coming from somewhere here, and so the shadow should be falling on the right side. And if you don't agree with me, just do whatever you want. I know there's people that maybe think that the light should be here and all the shadows should be falling here, but anyway, this is just the way I do it. I'm just showing you the technique. You can do whatever you want. Put the shadows wherever you think they should be. I'll flip it, I'll rotate it just a bit like that. And I'll create the layer mask for this. And get the brush tool. Set the opacity and the float to 100%. And I'll close this other document. And now you'll need to use a brush that comes with Photoshop. And for that you have to right click or use the brushes window from here. And if you don't see the brushes here, just click this icon and select reset brushes right here, and get this brush here. It's a grass brush that comes with Photoshop. But one thing you will need to do is set both colors to black, or open the brushes window pressing F5 and just deactivate color dynamics. And for the shape dynamics, I'll increase the minimum diameter just a bit. Now I'll zoom in and maybe also decrease the roundness and angle, something like that. And just paint with black on the layer mask. I have to make it way smaller. And just to paint like that on the edges, to make them fit a bit better, so that way it will look like this is really standing here in this grass. You could probably even deactivate the transfer option. Paint like that, and paint like that there as well. You can rotate the brush a bit like that to paint this part here. So I think it looks a lot better now. I'll deactivate the brush so you can see it. So it looks like it looks a lot better. Now what I will do is move this door a bit lower. I want this layer to be on top of the monument. Now that I have the door on top of the monument, I'll create the layer mask for it as well, and just do the same. I'll mask this part here, but I'll have to rotate the brush. I'll leave the angle to 0 and just mask that part as well, but something happened with this brush, so I'll do it again. Don't use a big brush like that. It will not look good. Use a small brush and just mask the bottom part of this door, and I'll probably move it there. Okay, and I'll make this monument just a bit bigger, like so. Okay, now let's make a few adjustments. The reason why I put the door on top of the monument is because between the monument and the door I will add a few adjustment layers. So I'll select the monument and add a gradient map. I'm quite a big fan of the gradient maps. And I'll set the colors for the shadows, this sort of unsaturated blue, like this. And then sort of a unsaturated yellow, or sort of a sepia color, like this. Click OK. I'll make this a bit darker, like so, and maybe this one a bit more saturated. And change the blend mode to soft light. And now reduce the opacity to about 40%. And with this we get a bit of color here on the clouds, but I want this to be a bit more saturated and a bit darker. And this color, let's see what we can do with it. Okay, let's leave it there. The exact values of the colors don't really matter, just to get this similar colors to these ones. And now let's add another gradient map. So gradient map, let's leave it to black and white, but I want this to be reversed like that, and it looks like this is not black. I want pure black and pure white, like that. I'll set the blend mode of this to multiply, and you can see that the contrast is a lot stronger now. But it's too strong, so I'll have to reduce the opacity to about 50%. So we got a bit of color and a bit of contrast. And the next adjustment that I will add is a black and white adjustment. This is not necessary, the change is not really big. What you do with this adjustment is control the amount of contrast or the brightness of each color. So for the reds, let's leave it to... I want to have this edge here a bit brighter, and also the tip of the grass, you can see how it lights up a bit. And let's leave it to about 160%. Then for the yellows, we can get a bit more contrast if we put negative values here, but this is up to you, your taste. It doesn't really... There's no formula for this. And then for the greens, let's see, we hardly have any greens here, so it's not really affecting the image. But we have cyans, so you can see that it affects mainly the shadows. So I'll leave this to about here. And then we have more blues here on the skies, on those clouds, but let's leave it there. I don't want to have negative values because it makes this part too dark, so I'll leave it here, maybe darken the cyans and brighten up this a bit. Okay, so let me show you the before and after. Of course, I'll have to decrease the saturation a bit. I'll leave it to about 50% or 40%. So it takes away even more color. So the door is not affected by any of these adjustments because the door is on top of these adjustments. So these gradient maps and the black and white only affect the monument and the background, and these are two sky stock images. And what we need to do now is start adding more elements. Let's go back to our stock image folder and open this clocks. I'll select the elliptical marquee tool because I'll use this one. You can use this one as well if you want to. And I'll create this selection from the middle. So if you press and hold the shift and the alt key, or shift or option on Mac, click here in the middle, and you can expand the selection from the center. If you only press the shift key, you will create a perfect circle, which is what we need, but it will be hard for you to adjust it because I have to do something like that and move it there. It's a lot easier to press and hold the Shift and Alt or Shift and Option and click there in the middle and expand the selection from the center of the clock, and then just move the selection a bit to adjust it, and then press Ctrl X to cut it. Go back to your image, and we have to paste this below the monument layer. So press Ctrl V to paste it there, and I selected parts that I don't need, so I'll use the eraser, a hard brush, and just get rid of these parts here that I don't need. Anyways, these parts will not be visible because we'll put this behind here, and I'll press Ctrl T to load the free transform and make it a bit smaller and place it here. You still want to see some of that wooden frame there, but what bothers me here is this highlight. I don't like it. So what I will do is deactivate the monument for a second. I'll change the name of this layer to clock. I'll get the brush tool, and what I'll do is select a normal brush, and I will sample some colors from the clock, from this frame itself, and just paint over it. Oops, it's too dark. I'll decrease the opacity of the brush. On the original image I used a layer style. I used the bevel and emboss and just cover that, but it's a lot easier using the brush tool. Just to cover that highlight there is not looking too nice. And now let's reactivate that, the monument layer. And in order to make this look a bit more realistic, what we need to do is add some shadow here. So open the layer styles for the clock layer, double clicking on it, and use inner shadow. I will deactivate global light. You can leave it on and just set the angle to about 130 degrees. I'll deactivate it and increase the distance and also increase the size. Change the angle a bit and something like that. And now you can see that this shadow matches the shadow type here on the door, so that makes it look a bit more realistic. I'll increase the size just a bit, have a softer shadow, and maybe decrease a bit the distance. So just play with the sliders a bit until you find it looks realistic. And if you need to change the contrast, for example on the monument or on the door, you can use curves or levels. And let's add some curves for this monument as clipping masks. So I'll click this icon. You can also create clipping masks if you hold the Alt key or Option key and just click when you see the cursor changing. You can click and you create a clipping mask layer. And these clipping masks only affect the layer that is below them, so in this case the monument. And I'll make it just a bit darker like that. And let's add more elements. Let's add our crow there on top. And I'll use the quick selection tool for that. It's a lot easier to use this tool. You could use the pen tool, but it's not necessary because we will reduce the size of this and the edges will be hardly visible, so you don't need accurate selection. You don't even have to use the refine edge. You can just make a rough selection like that, just exclude parts that are not well selected. You can exclude areas from the selection pressing and holding the Alt or Option key. And you can see that turns into a minus. And you can also see that right here on top. And oops, this is really bad. Okay, click that there. So I have the selection of this crow here. And all I need to do is press Ctrl C to copy it. I will not even create a layer mask for it. Oops, I have to include this area on the selection because it will not look nice if not. Okay, now I'll press Ctrl C, go back to my document. I'll have to close this first. Go back to my document and I'll paste this on top of these adjustment layers. And press Ctrl C and Ctrl T to load the free transform, make it smaller. And with the move tool, I'll put it here. And I'll zoom in and make it even smaller. If you're not sure about sizes and proportions, you can always turn your layers into smart objects before you scale them. And at the end, when you have everything on the scene, you can judge if something is too big or too small and then just make changes without losing quality. Let's name this Crow. Make it a bit smaller like that and maybe rotate it just a bit. And actually I'll desaturate this because I don't want those green edges, and I'll desaturate it completely. So that's my crow there. We will need to add shadows to all of this, to the crow, to the door, and things that we will add here. Let's close this image and let's open that image of the dead rose, which is this one. It's also a PNG file, so you can see the author of this image, so you can go to that website. You can down here you can see the credits of the author that made this stock image. So you have to credit the authors of the stock images whenever you can, and especially for this kind of PNG files, which are really useful. It saves you a lot of time. So I selected this rose because I like this one. So Ctrl C to copy it, go back to my document and paste it here on top of the crow. I'll name the layer that rose. Again, Ctrl T to load the free transform, make it smaller. So you can see the process it's the same. Just to add all the stock images, change the sizes, and place them on your scene. About that big is okay. And I want to flip it vertically because I like how it looks that way. And maybe make it a bit smaller. Okay, now we have the rose there. And let's add this text here on that stone. Again, Ctrl A to select the entire canvas, Ctrl C to copy it, Ctrl W to close. And I'll have to close this document as well. And I'll paste that on top of the dead rose. And I'll have to make it smaller. And let's see how we can get rid of this background, because I only need this text. You could use the quick selection tool to select the text, or maybe you could use the color range, but it's a lot easier using the multiply blend mode. But the multiply blend mode only works with white backgrounds. So what we need to do first is use the levels or the curves to get this background to be white. So I'll press Ctrl L. In this case, I will not use an adjustment layer because I want this change to be permanent. So I will use an adjustment instead of an adjustment layer, and I'll just I'll get the right slider and move it to the left to get this background to be bright, and keep the text like it is right now. And now that I have the background white, I'll still have the corners, so I'll have to mask those, but let's change the blend mode to multiply first and we will see. So now you can see that the text remains, but the background is gone, except those edges where it was not completely white. Let's erase those edges there. You can see if I move it, you can see those edges there are not completely invisible. So I'll get the eraser tool. I'll use the soft eraser. And you could use a layer mask, but as I said, I want this change to be permanent. I don't mind losing this part of the image. Like that, and now those edges are gone. And I'll put the text here, make it smaller. Like that. And I want it to be a bit more unsaturated, so I'll press Ctrl U to load the hue saturation. You can also do that if you go to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, but remember that it's a lot faster and it's a lot easier to use the keyboard shortcuts. And decrease the saturation just a bit, about -40%. -40 actually, it's not a percentage, I guess. And let's leave it there. And let's move to the door side. We need to add that hand there and those shoes. So the first thing I'll do is, I have the shoes extracted. I'll give you the link. You have the link to the image, but the method that I used to extract them is use the pen tool, just like I did with that monument. Just trace a path around them, then right click, choose make selection, and copy, extract them from the background and paste them here. Let's rename this to alone. This was the layer for this text here, and I'll paste those shoes above the door because I want to put them here, and they have to be on top of the door layer if I want them to be visible. And I'll make them smaller. Now this is really important. You need to use the proportions here. If you leave the shoes like that, it's obvious they're obviously too big. So I hardly recommend you turn this into a smart object and just play with the sizes, because if you make them too small, they will not look realistic and it will make the whole image look bad. So make sure you just, if you put them here, make sure you use a correct size. I think something like this would be okay. Let me zoom out a bit so I can see them better. Okay, maybe even a bit smaller. By the way, if you want to select a layer that belongs to a certain object, what you can do is select the move tool. You can do that if you press the V key or just click here. And once you have the move tool selected, press and hold the control key or command on Mac and just click on that object, and it will select the layer that belongs to that object. And I'll rename this to shoes, and I wanted to make them a bit smaller, something like that. Move them here, and as I said, we need to make the shadows, but let's add all the elements first. And the only thing that's left to add is that hand, and that candle here. I forgot about that. Again, the hand, I already have it extracted, is this image. It's also from DeviantArt. I'll give you the link to that. Just trace a path around the fingers and hand, crop it from the background, and you get this image, and just flip it. Select everything, Control C to copy it, and I'll paste it again above the door layer. I'll turn it into a smart object as well and change the name to hand. Press Ctrl T to load the free transform again and make it smaller. And you can judge the size of the hand by just watching this thing here. So imagine how big it should be, because this is the place where you would grab the door if you want to open it. So I think something like this would look realistic, maybe even a bit smaller, but well, I'll leave it like that. And just to make sure you align that edge there with the edge of the door, like so. And let's see, maybe a bit, well, I think it's right. You can put it higher or lower, but don't put it too high. Somewhere there it's okay, a bit higher like that. Okay. And what you need to do here is desaturate it, because it has too much color. So I'll use a hue saturation adjustment layer. You cannot use an adjustment here because this is a smart object. So if you go to image adjustments, this list is not active. So with smart objects, you need to use adjustment layers. So I'll use a hue saturation as clipping mask, because I only want to affect the hand and not the rest of the scene. So press and hold the Alt key, put the mouse between the two layers and click. And reduce the saturation to about -50 or -60. Almost completely desaturated. And well, we're good to go. We need that candle. I almost forgot about that. This is the image. You can use the quick selection tool. I don't need the fire. If you want to get that, you can select the fire as well. But I only want the candle. And I'll tell you the reason why in just a second. Just let me copy it first. So once I have the selection, Control C to copy it. Go back to my document, and I'll have to go here and paste this on top of the alone layer. Actually, the position is not relevant as long as you put it on top of the monument so you can see it, and also on top of the clock. And I'll make it smaller, and I'll name this layer Candle. Put it here, make it even smaller, like that. I'll turn this into a smart object as well, because I don't know how big it should be, so I want to be able to resize it if I need to. About that big, I think it's okay. Use the move tool and place it there. And the reason why I want this candle to be I don't want that fire there is because I'm playing with that concept of time, the pass of time. That rose there is dead, so with this candle you can also emphasize that pass of time. So that's why I used this kind of candle. I'll add the smoke there. Go to DeviantArt and look for a smoke stock image. I'll scroll down until I see the resources and stock images and type smoke. And you can use any stock image that you can find of smoke. You'll find tons of brushes, so you might want to choose stock images. And you can see a lot of stock images of smoke here. You can use any of them. I'll use this one. You don't even have to open it or to save it unless you want to. What I'll do is just right click and choose copy image. Go back to Photoshop. Paste it here. You can see it's big because this part here is very small. By the way, this image is provided by ISO stock, so you can go here on DeviantArt and go to their account and just get this image if you want to. If not, you can use your own image. Just get any image of smoke that you want. I'll reactivate this, make it smaller, and in order to get rid of this background, also I didn't mention you need to find a stock image of smoke that it's shot against a black background, because that way we can use the screen blend mode like that and get rid of that background. And of course I'll have to make this way smaller and put that there. Okay, and what I'll do is desaturate it because it looks blue, so I'll desaturate it almost completely. And maybe you'll have to erase some edges there with a soft brush. And there's our candle, and let's rename this to smoke. So now we have all the elements on our image. What we need to do now to make this look a bit more realistic is create shadows. So we need to create a shadow for this rose, for the shoes, and for the door as well. So let's start with the door because it's the biggest object here. Let me find that using the same trick that I just showed you. What I'll do is duplicate this image, get rid of the layer mask. By the way, you can duplicate a layer if you press and hold the Alt or Option key and drag down. You will create duplicates of layers, and you can also press Control J and then drag the layer below it. And let's name this to, and you can see it's below the original layer, and you can see it there. And what I'll do is press Control U to load the hue saturation and reduce lightness to -100. This is a technique that I used a lot of times in my other manipulation tutorials. Now I'll press Control T to load the free transform and right click and select Distort. Everything that I did so far can be done in previous versions of Photoshop, maybe except the smart objects. Photoshop CS3 in Photoshop CS3 you don't have the option to create smart objects, but it's not really that important if you cannot do that. So once I have the distort option selected, I can cast that shadow there and try to make it more or less parallel to this other shadow there of that monument. And there's my shadow there. Probably drag this up, make it a bit longer. Just place it in your position, and just place it there on your image like that. Press enter when you're done, and what you need to do is smoothen this shadow a bit, and you can use the filter. You can use the Gaussian blur filter for that. So just go to blur, Gaussian blur, and apply about 4 pixels of blur. If you really want to make it realistic, what you could do is turn this into a smart object, apply the filter, and then apply a mask to the filter, because this shadow here should be sharper than the end here, and someone mentioned that on one of my tutorials, but I just prefer to do it like this. And now I want to fade out this shadow a bit. First I'll decrease the opacity to about, let's see, 55%, because shadows are not completely black. And I created this layer mask because now I want to fade out the shadow, so I'll use the gradient tool, and I'll use a linear gradient. So select this linear type and click somewhere here and drag in that direction, but I'll have to reverse it and do it again. Oh. Okay, something like that. Okay, now it looks a bit more realistic in my opinion than this. It's just a matter of taste. And now let's go with the shoes, because we have them here. For the shoes I'll paint the shadow myself, so I selected the shoes layer, press and hold the control key and click this new layer icon, and that way I create the layer below the layer instead of on top of it. And I'll rename this to Shoes Shadow, and I'll get the brush tool, set the colors, the foreground color to black, the opacity and the flow to about 40%. I'll have to zoom in, and I'll create 2 types of shadows. The first shadow, which I name Contact Shadow, I don't know if it has a technical name, and I'll paint with a brush like this, hardness to about 20-25%, and just paint a harder brush right there where the object touches the ground. You can see it's a very visible shadow, just on the edge, like that, and here as well. You don't need a tablet for this, you can do this perfectly fine with the mouse. Now I have that shadow there. What I will do now is increase the brush size a bit, decrease hardness to 0, and reduce the opacity to about 20%, and the flow as well. And I'll just paint a few soft shadows around those edges. Again, this is a technique that I used in other tutorials, and I think I have a tutorial only about how to make this kind of shadows. So just paint a few shadows like those ones, and you'll see the before and after. Now it looks a bit more realistic. And also for the shoes, you can make them a bit darker if you want to. You can use layer styles, maybe a gradient overlay, and change a bit the angle. Not too much, like that, and maybe change the blend mode to multiply. Drag this down a bit. Okay, just add a bit of darkness there on the bottom, like that. So you can see it. I think it looks a bit better. Maybe decrease the scale just a bit. Okay, now click OK. And now let's see, with the hand, let's create the shadows for the hand as well. Let's locate that layer with control click on it. And I'll create another layer below it, and I'll name it hand shadow. Well, actually I'll have to duplicate this layer, so what I'll do is copy the name and delete the layer and create a duplicate of this layer by holding the Alt or Option key, click and drag. I'll let go and you create a copy of that. And I'll paste that name. And the first thing I'll do is rasterize the layer, because this, you can see this icon here tells me that this is a smart object and I don't need a smart object, so I'll rasterize the layer because I only want to have this. I'll create the silhouette, pressing and holding the U key and reducing the lightness, just like we did with the door. Click OK, and that hand is there behind it. So what I'll do now is use the arrow keys on my keyboard to move this here and something like that. And what I will do now is go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and use about 5 pixels of radius. Click OK. But we don't need this part here. We only need the part that touches that that is on the frame here. So what I did is I used the selection, the edges of the door. So press and hold the Control or Command key, locate the door layer, and click on it while you have the Control key pressed, and you will load the selection of the door. But what you will need to do now is invert the selection, and you can do that if you press and hold the Control Shift and I, or Command Shift I to invert the selection, or also if you go to Select and choose Inverse, and you can see the keyboard shortcut here. And now go back to the hand shadow layer, so select the hand shadow layer again, and with the active selection, with the selection active, press delete, and that way you delete that part of the shadow that you don't need. And now select the hand, because we need to create some shadows on the hand itself. And since we already have this hue saturation as clipping mask, if I select the hand layer and click the new layer icon, it will create a new layer automatically as a clipping mask. And I'll name this hand shadow 2. And again, I'll get the brush tool, leave the opacity and float to about 20%. I have to close this image and make it smaller. And just paint some shadows here on this, only on this part of the hand. And the reason why I do this is because this hand comes from behind that door, and that the door itself casts a bit of shadow right there. So details like this, I think, will make your images stand out a bit. But I'll have to delete everything because I'm not using the black color. I'll do it again. Maybe increase a bit the opacity and the flow. And something like that. I think this one looks a bit better. Okay. And for the hand shadow layer, the first one, I'll decrease the opacity a bit, like so. And I'll deactivate the hand shadow too, so you can see the before and after. So before and after, I think it adds a bit more depth to it, a bit more dimension, and this one makes it look a whole lot more realistic. So that's how I created the shadow for that hand. Oops. Let's go to the dead rose and then to that candle there. So I'll locate the layer of the dead rose. Again, create a layer below it and name it Rose Shadow. Get the brush tool and use about, let's leave that on 30%. Use a small brush, and instead of painting the shadow right underneath it, I'll paint it straight, because I want to simulate a bit of something here. I want to make it look like this part of the rose is not touching the ground, so I'll paint the shadow under it like that. I don't like how that looks. Okay. Also some shadows here under these leaves here, and here as well, using a small brush. So as I said in many of my tutorials, working with with low opacity brushes is a lot better because you can build up the effect gradually. So it's a lot easier, and it saves you from making a lot of mistakes. So that's the shadow for my rose there, before and after. And now let's go with the candle, and let's create another layer under it and just do the same. Let's paint a shadow like that. I'm using a soft brush, as you can see, hardness to 0. Okay, I'll use the eraser tool because I don't want. Okay, that looks a lot better. And if you zoom out, you can see how that looks. I don't really like this shadow right here. I'll paint that again. Okay, and you can see the before and after. It makes it look a lot better. And for the candle, what I did on the original image is also change a bit the color using layer styles. So I'll double click on the candle layer to open the layer styles, and I used the color overlay because I wanted to change the color, and used a bright yellow, unsaturated yellow like this. Change the blend mode to color. You can see it makes it look a bit more yellow and maybe a bit more saturated like that. And reduce the opacity to a level where you can see it looks better. Right now, if you leave it to 100%, it doesn't look too realistic. So about there, you can see the before and after. And I also wanted to add a bit of shadow right there on the right side. So for that, I used a gradient overlay, set the angle to 180 degrees, and I'll have to change the colors. Let's see if it's black and white. Okay, and decrease the scale because I don't want that it's too smooth, the transition. I want something a bit harder. And now I'll click right there on the image and move this gradient overlay like that, and change the blend mode to multiply, and that way the white part of this gradient will go away. So multiply, and you can see how that looks. Even so, I'll have to maybe decrease the scale a bit more and decrease the opacity because I don't want it too strong. I just want a faint shadow right there, and you can see before and after. I think it looks a bit better. I'll zoom out a bit so you can see it. So at 100%, this is how it looks. So without the effects and with the effects. If you don't add any effects, it looks a bit flat, and especially if you don't add that shadow, it looks really flat. So with shadows, you can really add more dimension to your images. Also, this smoke looks a bit too strong for my taste. So what I would do is maybe decrease a bit the opacity to about 60% or 70%. And you could also paint a few shadows under the scroll, but I'll skip that. It's not very visible. So we're done with the adjustments and with the elements. Everything is ready. Let's go now with some final adjustments. And let's make our final adjustments. So the first adjustment that I used is a color fill, so solid color. And you can use a blue color, a really dark one, something like that, and you'll see why. And change the blend mode of this adjustment layer to Exclusion. This is not an adjustment that I use very often, but for this kind of effects works really well. And let me tell you how this adjustment works, how this blend mode works actually. If you set colors that are really bright, you can see it kind of inverts the image. And if you set it to black, it has no effect whatsoever. So you can see the before and after because the color is black. But if you set a really dark color, in this case blue, what it does is it kind of inverts the image. You can see that the highlights are yellow because yellow is the opposite of blue, and the shadows are blue because that's the color that I selected here. So if you don't understand, it doesn't really matter, just to set a really dark blue like this. And what you can see, what it does, it takes away a bit of contrast. You can see it makes the image a bit brighter. It adds sort of a misty effect to it. I don't know how to explain that, but you can see that before and after. You can see the effect. And next I added another gradient map, and the colors that I selected for this, I wanted to add the final color effect, sort of a cyan like this, a really dark one, and then an orange color like this, and really bright and unsaturated, something like that. Something like that, and maybe this color a bit more towards the blue tone, something like that. Click OK, OK, and OK, and set the blend mode to soft light at about 30 or 40%, and this adds a bit of contrast, and it adds a bit more color, and it makes the whole image look a bit better. If you want to take away the contrast, just remember to go back to the fill layer and use a lighter tone of this color that you chose. Let's leave this on blue here. Okay, now let's add the last filters, and usually what I do is create a stamp, and you can do that. Select the top layer on your layers palette and press Shift, Control, Alt, and E, or Shift, Command, Option, and E. I have to get used to this keyboard shortcuts because I'll get an iMac soon, so I will no longer use a PC. And let's name this to Final. And I'll turn this into a smart object because I'll add a few filters to it. The first filter that I add is the lighting effect. So go to Filter, Render, Lighting Effects, and from here we will add two lights. Let's wait for the filter to load. Well, actually I have them already here from the last time I used them. I used the spotlight first. Let me zoom out a bit. You can see it's a really big soft light with a big hot spot here, and it comes from here. And what I wanted to do with this is, you can see I add more light in this part, like that. You can see the values that I have also here. And most probably these values won't work for you because it depends on the image that you have, on how much contrast you have. So you can play with these values here. Usually I want to have this kind of hot spot, not too small and not too big, because what I want, the objective really here, is to add light where the center of interest is, which is this one here, this object, and some vignetting on the corners here. So I'll probably decrease the hotspot just a bit, and maybe the intensity lower it to about 16. And then I have a point light. Looks like it kept the Spanish name. This is a point light, and I added that because I wanted to have a bit more light here on this other monument here, or whatever this thing is. Because with the spotlight I added light here, but this one remained in shadow, so I added this kind of so I added this second light to add a bit more light here as well, somewhere there. And if you want to play with the contrast, just remember that the metallic slider takes away or adds contrast, but I'll have to go to the spotlight because this is the main light on my image. So if I set this to -100, I take away all the contrast, and if you increase the slider, if you set it to 100%, you'll get more contrast. Let's click OK and see how the image looks. Okay, I'll zoom in a bit, and I'll deactivate this layer so you can see the before and after. Let me zoom out a bit. So before, with the lighting effects and without it, you can see that now this part has a bit more light, and I don't really like how that door looks because it's too bright maybe. So I would have to change a bit the settings of the light. And then another thing that I used is the lens correction filter, because I wanted to add a bit more vignette. Make sure you uncheck everything here on the auto correction. I don't want to make any correction automatically. Just go to the custom tab and use the vignette slider to add a bit more of vignetting, and click OK. And then, well, on the door, that's why the door looks too bright. I should have used some levels on the doors level, on the doors layer, sorry. So just locate the door, add some levels, and decrease the midtones maybe a bit. Let me do that. But well, anyways. And then the last filter that I used, and maybe you don't have this filter and it doesn't really matter. It's a topaz filter. It's really good. I think it's worth the money. I think it's about $50. I don't remember. But it's a really cool filter. You can also use the HDR filter. It kind of has the same effect. But I don't know how this filter works. I just like how it enhances the details. And you can maybe boost a bit the medium details. And also what I did from this filter is desaturate the image. So I decreased saturation and increased the boost here. So decrease from here and boost it from there just a bit. So it almost has no color. And then maybe change a bit the contrast. And decrease the brightness, but not too much. Maybe add a bit more color. So well, you could spend a bit of time here changing the effects and getting the look that you want. Oops, I just reset it. Let me undo that. Let's see if I can undo it. Okay, and click OK and apply the filter. And this is my final image. Let me go to full screen so you can see it better. So with the final adjustments and without the final adjustments, the final filters. So well, that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you liked it. It was a bit long and maybe I went a bit quick on some parts, but as I said, this was not a beginner's level tutorial. And well, I hope you liked it. If you have any problems, just post a comment on YouTube or on my website. And if you want to see more tutorials about Photoshop, you can visit my channel or my website. And as I said, I have a playlist with just go here to playlists. I have a playlist for Photoshop beginners and also only for manipulation. And also you can visit Manny's channel. He has a lot of great Photoshop tutorials. Let me show you his uploads. You can see here a lot of good quality, really good quality tutorials. And you can see all the tutorials that he makes about lighting, about retouching, how to get effects on portraits and things like that. So make sure you pay him a visit. So well, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. See you next time.